Hello, good evening. I am Kristin Marting. I am the founding artistic director of Here Art Center in New York City and co-founding director of the Prototype Festival. And I'm excited to be here to talk with you a bit about the performing arts in New York City and what my experience has been over the years I've been doing this. So hello and welcome. Um, I was trained as a theater director. I went to New York University here in New York City. Uh, I studied originally as a performer, and then I started studying directing. And I found that directing was really where I found my excitement, and I found all the threads of what I thought my skills were, be able to come into focus in a room. I really love the problem solving, the collaboration, the emotional connection, um, the creativity on the fly, the feeling the space. So all of these things that come into play to be a theater director um, were skills I felt I had been applying in other places, but then I really found that that was the place I wanted to be. Um, I When I graduated from NYU, I didn't feel like the kind of work I was interested in, that there were a lot of opportunities for that. Um, I decided that what I was interested in was trying to make my own work on my own terms. And so I joined together with three of my colleagues who I'd gone to theater school with, and we formed our own theater company. Um, Oh, I just want to add along the way, if you have questions, please drop them into the chat and we'll address questions in the latter part of the session, but we'd love to start collecting them now. So thank you for that. Um, so we decided we wanted to start our own company, and it was a small company. It was four of us, three directors and one performer. And we decided that what we were interested in was creating a space for directors to craft their own work. Um, and instead of most theaters will pick a season by picking plays, or they have resident performers and they think about what are plays that would be good for these performers to perform. But what we wanted to do was to pick directors who we were really excited about and think about how they could create a season of exciting work. So that's what we did. The original company was called the Tiny Mythic Theater Company. We founded in 1988, and we did a regular season. In New York, the seasons are September to June, and usually it's quiet in the summers. What we decided to do was to do a September to June season of 3 to 4 works. And then in the summer, we started New York City's first summer festival. It was called the American Living Room. We started it in the summer of 1989. And it was an opportunity for young directors to create work each weekend. And share it with enthusiastic audiences. At that time, we charged $5 to get in. It was called the American Living Room because we set it up with sofas and easy chairs, and we had a kitchen where people could buy beers and sit down on the sofa and watch the art. The theater at that time was not air conditioned, so it was very, very hot. So you really needed that cold beer. And sometimes it was so hot during intermission that we'd set up a sprinkler outside the theater so people could kind of run through the sprinkler and get wet and then come back in and watch the shows. There'd be 3 shows in an evening, and it was only $5 the first year that we started because we really wanted to make it accessible. And that's been a thread through my career, is thinking, unlike in Moscow, where there is a lot of access to the arts at a range of prices and affordability. And I know there's a lot of theaters that have the student rush policy where the students can get in right before the curtain for free. In New York, theater tends to be a lot more expensive, and really wanting young audiences to be able to be exposed to the work. So that's really what we did. That company existed for about 5 years. We made a lot of exciting work. We got a lot of wonderful press. We received awards. It was really exciting. We felt like we wanted our own permanent home. We were based in Soho at the Ohio Theater for those first 5 years, and did probably over those years about 15 or 20 shows in our regular season. And in the American Living Room every summer, the first summer it was 18 works. But by the time we left the Ohio in 1993, we had gotten up to, we'd expanded it from a directing cabaret to include a performance series, a music lounge, a puppet parlor, and a film and video salon. So you could come every night of the week and see like different stuff. So it became quite a large festival that was multidisciplinary. Probably that last summer, we must have had over 100 works in the festival from July and August. But in the fall of 1993, we opened our own space. It's called Here Art Center. We opened it on October 28th of 1993. And the goal of Here was to also be a multidisciplinary space that supported artists that were contemporary artists, that were thinking about exciting work. It was founded by my original company, Tiny Mythic Theater, and another company called Home for Contemporary Theater and Art. We founded the space together. And the goal was to be a non-hierarchical, organizationally collaborative space. So we included the founding companies, invited about 10 other companies to join us in the first year. And so we had a group that worked with kids, that was an educational program. We had one that was a playwrights group. We had one that was an ensemble group of actors. So we had all these different kind of perspectives, a dance company, a technology, a tech and arts company. So we were trying to make this space that would have all these organizations collaborate, that would do innovative contemporary work, that supported all disciplines, that included multidisciplinary and hybrid approaches. So that's what we started in 1993. There were 4 of us, 2 from each company, that were the directors of the space. And we ran non-hierarchically, and we shared responsibilities, and we rotated responsibilities. And we did that for a couple of years, and then we started to feel like it was getting more complex, the different aspects of the organization. So we really wanted to go ahead and formalize what people's roles were. We built the space from scratch. It wasn't a theater at the time, so we did a lot. We did it very economically. When we first opened in 1993, I think the renovation was about $350,000 on 13,000 square feet. So what would that be in meters? Like 4,500 meters, 4,000 meters, something like that. And it had 3 theaters. A large 99-seat flexible black box theater, a 74-seat, more like a cabaret type space with cafe tables and chairs and a fixed stage, and then a more proscenium style 75-seat space downstairs. We had a public gallery that was open during the days, as well as a cafe in the front of the space that was open from early in the morning till late at night. We wanted to think of ourselves as a real gathering place, and a place where folks could really come at any time of the day. They could check out the art and have a glass of wine or have a cup of coffee. They could work in the lounge. They could go see a show. We wanted, as much as possible, a big philosophy for us was a space that was integrating art into everyday life and really joining those things together. So that art was not for special occasions. Art was for your daily sustenance, like a cup of coffee, like a bagel for breakfast. So that was really our goal. So the accessibility that started with the original company continued with Here. Just to fast forward a little sec, we were reaching anywhere between 30 and 40,000 people a year with this venue, with people walking in for the gallery or experiencing the art in the different spaces. We invite folks you could do double features. You could see one show in the downstairs theater and then grab a glass of wine in between and see the upstairs theater show as well. So that's that was the premise of the work. We've been through many evolutions over time. I think I'll stay on the real estate thread for a sec, and then I'll go back and talk a bit about the organizational structure and then about the programming. So in terms of the space itself, we opened in 93. As I said, we had the 3 theaters. We had an opportunity in 2005 to purchase our space. We were only renting this space. We had a long-term lease. And we had an opportunity to purchase because the whole building converted to commercial condominiums. So we were happily able to purchase the space. We bought it for $1.7 million in 2005, about a $5 million capital campaign to purchase the space and renovate it. Now that we owned it, we wanted to renovate it and really make it our own. We chose to buy less real estate than we had previously occupied. We bought 9,000 square feet, or about 3,000 meters of our original space. So we changed our entrance, and we made the lounge a little smaller, the cafe a little smaller. We had 2 theaters instead of 3. And this was very exciting for us because it meant that more of the work that people saw would be the work that we curated and produced ourselves, and less work would be curated work from the outside. So this was a progression in our thinking as an organization, and it was a strategic purchase. We completed the renovation in 2008, and the space has been appraised at about $8 million, so it was a really good investment for us. And it has been very important because here is located in a neighborhood. Soho, Hudson Square is kind of the 2 neighborhoods that we're like right in between the 2. So we have a footprint in either one. And that neighborhood has had radical changes over the years. When we first were working in this neighborhood, it was still very much an arts neighborhood. There were artist lofts, there were artist studios, there was a lot of arts focused activity. And there's been, since we started working in this neighborhood in 1988, there's been a massive change to the neighborhood. And Soho is much more a shopping district now, and there are very few galleries or arts organizations left. So it feels really important that there's still a stake in Lower Manhattan for the kind of art making that is what this neighborhood was about initially, and for it to still have a foothold. One of the things that's happened in the real estate market in New York has been that through gentrification and cost changes, so many artists have moved further and further away from this district. And then also in terms of Manhattan, it's become so expensive. So artists have had to move further and further out in New York City, making it more and more challenging for their work to be seen and contextualized in the larger New York City market. So we're an important bastion of experimental contemporary work in Manhattan, and there are fewer and fewer of them. So we're quite happy to be able to hold that down for folks. So that's kind of the real estate piece. I think that you have my bio, and you can link to our website, which is here.org, and you can see the space there, and there's a video and stuff, so you can get a sense of that and of our programs. On the staffing and organizational structure front, we also have been pretty experimental. We started non-hierarchically, as I mentioned, but then we started, and we were 2 organizations that created this space together. And we realized that the name that we came up with here was because we wanted something that was transparent, that spoke about a bunch of things being able to be there, that wasn't specifically aligned with a particular aesthetic. So that's how we came to our name, Here Art Center, and Here, as we generally go by, Here Arts. And it was about don't go there, come here. And it was about inclusivity and welcoming, and having a lot of different instincts and a lot of different companies and a lot of different artistic approaches, all welcome. When we got a couple years in, we had some debt from building the place. We had challenges in terms of raising our annual budgets. So we decided it was getting complicated to explain to funders, we have 3 different organizations. There's this organization, and then the venue, and we're looking for support for just the venue, or we're looking for support for this organization. So it became simpler to try to explain to people we are one entity, and all of the programming that we do is underneath that one entity. So we had a funeral, and we buried the separate companies and just became Here. And it was a very festive. For those that are familiar with New Orleans has a wonderful second line that is around funerals and the celebration of a life. So we had a New Orleans style funeral with a jazz band, and we served all New Orleans style food. It was a really fun party, and we celebrated the new Here and celebrated the lives that had existed of the separate theater companies. And then we rolled all the programming underneath that one entity. And we also at that time felt like it was easier for folks to understand how the organization worked by having one leader. So my partners asked me to step into the role of executive director. And so I did that for a number of years. and I kept that part of the organization afloat so that the funders felt like they had one person to speak to. We still worked very collaboratively and very non-hierarchically. So it was really a way for me to people to identify who they needed to speak to. So I was the executive director for over 10 or 12 years. And then I really, I had continued to direct, but I was feeling like I was struggling to direct as much as I wanted to, wearing so many hats. So I brought a partner in, Kim Whitener, as our producing director. And I became the artistic director instead of executive director. So Kim and I were partnered for about 10 years. The staff grew at this time. The staff initially was the four of us plus two others when we first founded the place. We have evolved and grown over the years. I'm now the founding artistic director and report to the board directly. Kim left after about 11 years. I've had other partnership structures. Now the structure is, as founding artistic director, I report to the board, and there's a managing director and a bunch of other folks. Our staff's about 16 people now. 16 full-time in all different departments, keeping the stuff going. The initial budget for here, its first year, was about $300,000. Our budget now varies between $2.5 and $3 million. And you know, we still work in a lot of non-hierarchical ways. We have staff committees that do a lot of decision making and bring ideas to the staff to vote on, and we vote, and then that's how we go forward. There's an HR department, there's a budget committee, there's a equity strategy, and we just changed the name. We have our ESA committee, which is dealing with sustainability and equity and accessibility, like all of those things working together. We have accountability committee. So these committees are doing a lot of the thinking and a lot of the strategizing for the organization, and then bringing those ideas to full staff for conversation, and we move things forward. So we have a kind of unconventional way of working, which has been a big part of who we have been through our existence. And that relates very particularly to our programming, which is very unique. Here is a producer, a presenter, and a venue. As a producer, we have resident artists that are with us for 2 to 4 years to develop a singular project. Each artist has their own timeline, their own way of growing their work. One project might be a puppetry work for 3 artists that they grow over 2 years and premiere with a budget of $150,000. Another project might be a 35-person women ensemble that is a music theater piece dealing with the divine feminine with a budget of $400,000. Another, like, so the scale is hugely different. Very small works, very large works, and we're supporting these artists from the inception stage. So unlike most theaters, we're not reading a play and being like, oh, we want to do that play. What we're doing is we're reading an artist's concept for a work, and then we're having a conversation with them, and we're looking at their past works. And based on their past works, we're making a choice and a bet on them. And in our residency program, we also do something quite unusual. When we first have that interview process and we're selecting an artist, we're making a commitment of $125,000 to that artist and their project. That's $50,000 in cash and $75,000 in space, equipment, and services towards the development and growth of their work. And then we partner with them to find the other folks that they will collaborate with, the other organizations we might collaborate with to bring the work together, the audiences that they want to speak to, the communities that they want to engage with the work. And we grow all of that over the 2 to 3 years until the culminating production. And then we help launch that work on tour. So it's a very customized process that we do with each artist. And it's a real full-in commitment to them and their process. So that's our core program, our Here Artist Residency Program, or HARP is the abbreviation. And then we have something called Here and Back, which is for artists that we've worked with in the past through HARP, and we want to work with them again, but not in as deep a process. Maybe it's a 1-year process that we work with them to get the work to full production. And those artists, it's also, we're committing to produce the work, and the budgets vary greatly depending on the number of artists. That's our core producing. That usually makes up the bulk of our season. We usually do 3 or 4 full-scale productions that are from HARP and Here and Back in each season. We also work as a presenter. I mentioned the American Living Room, that festival that we did 1 million years ago. We did that festival for almost 20 years, but we don't do that any longer. We felt like there were a number of other people working in the summer festival area in New York City, and that we wanted to continue to bring something unique. And so we've kept our other festivals, but that festival we ceased just before it turned 20. We have our Dream Music puppetry program, which produces our annual Puppetopia Festival. So this is something we work with adult puppetry, primarily. Sometimes it's 12 and up, 12 years old and up, but we're interested in cutting edge, outdoor, indoor puppetry for adults, often with live music. Sometimes it's pre-recorded, international works that haven't been in New York City yet, primarily. So we bring stuff in that New York City audiences haven't had a chance to be exposed to, and give them a short engagement in New York. We also, in Puppetopia, will include some local artists who are premiering new works with us in the festival. And that festival is usually like 2 weeks, and it's in both our theaters. So that double feature thing I mentioned, you can kind of do that, come for an evening and experience that. We also, as a venue, we provide a home for local artists to self-produce in our space at a subsidized rate. It's a curated program. It's called our Sublet Series. And then we also have Sublet Series Co-op, which is for even earlier career artists who want a shorter run. Our Sublet Series offers a home it's a well-equipped theater with great lighting and sound package. We offer the box office support. We do some marketing for them, and we provide some technical oversight. So those artists are supported, but they get to make the work that they want to make in a well-equipped, well-run space. So that's what that program's trying to do. So those are kind of our 3 main programs. And I think that the thing that's unique is that we work interdisciplinary across those programs. There's sometimes it's a puppetry artist, sometimes it's a dance artist, sometimes it's a music artist, sometimes it's a puppetry artist. So there's this opportunity for a kind of cross-pollination of audiences and artists to influence each other. And that's really, that really was at the core of why we also decided to start our other major festival that we still do, which is the Prototype Festival. Prototype is an opera and music theater festival that is citywide. It is not just at our venue. Our venue, in fact, is the smallest venue that we use in the festival. So we have shows that are in theaters ranging from 70 seats to 800 seats in the festival. We usually partner with 4 or 5 venues in Manhattan and Brooklyn to do the festival. We also have an outdoor aspect of the festival every year, even though it's in January. This year will be the 11th annual Prototype, and it's a co-production that we do with another company, Beth Morrison Projects, who was someone that we had co-produced with and we had found a simpatico with. And the focus of this festival is to do opera and music theater. And it's been recognized as one of the important opera festivals in the world. We have presenters and opera directors from all over the world come attend the festival every January. In New York City, there's a lot of activity in January. There's a lot of different festivals and conferences where these folks gather, and we've been a beneficiary and an important part of fueling that excitement and economy in January. The Prototype Festival has also been a way that we have brought in both international artists in the opera and music realm to expose new sounds to New York City audiences. We brought artists from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe. So we've really spread ourselves and throughout the globe to find amazing stuff that we think New York City audiences haven't been exposed to yet. And that festival continues. This January, we'll have a huge amount of work offered. We started one of the challenges that we've run into over the years has been how to reach audiences outside of this like immediate New York City area. And also, even in New York City, how do you reach communities that might not feel comfortable walking into a place like here? How do you find new people that want to engage with the work, with this kind of contemporary experimental work? And so we started developing some works with our resident artists that they would come in with projects that were intended to be in other locations. And we've been doing that for a number of years. We've performed, in high school gymnatoriums, in museum spaces, in Governor's Island is this island just off Manhattan that has a lot of outdoor performance. You take a little ferry to get there. That's a 5-minute ferry ride. So we've explored these different outdoor spaces. We've done stuff in ice skating rinks. We've done stuff in public parks. We've done stuff in front of transit centers like the Staten Island Ferry. We've always been interested in this. One of the challenges of COVID, of course, was not being able to be in person. And as a theater, that was a significant challenge that we faced. So we created a lot of programming during COVID that was online and outdoor. And some of the outdoor was you come at this time and you experience it with other people outdoors. But some of the outdoor was you can do this by yourself whenever you want. And we had a lot of success during COVID. Here usually reaches, as I mentioned, about 30 to 40,000 people a year. But during COVID, we were, through our online and outdoor programming, we were reaching about 300,000 people. And we were reaching people in 65 countries and on 6 of the 7 continents. So that was pretty cool. And when we came back from COVID, although it's still an evolving process, we really wanted to capitalize the opportunity to engage with those audiences. And so we decided to do a digital platform that had digital and outdoor attached to it. And we think of it as our 4th stage. I said we had, multiple stages before, but this is our other stage, is this. It's called You Are Here. It's the letter U, the letter R, here, HERE.ART. And that platform launched in beta in November of 22, and it continues to upgrade. We have about 10 or 11 offerings on the platform at the moment. We add new stuff every month, and it'll be an ever-growing library. We're going to add live streaming as a regular component of it this coming fall season. But it actually hasn't been focused on live streaming, which so many theaters have done, and we think that's fine. But we were kind of more interested in the work that got created during COVID that was outdoor work that was engaging audiences who wouldn't regularly walk into a contemporary performing arts center. What kind of work like that can we keep doing? What artists who are making digital native work, meaning they don't want to make it for a theater and we videotape it. They want to make it for the digital space, and they're thinking of those digital tools. So what digital native works can we support and commission? And then what amazing shows did we have in the past that other people weren't able to see because they weren't New York City based, or because they had kids that needed to stay home with, or whatever the reason was, they couldn't come, and make those available. So that's the premise of You Are Here. And it's something that is really important for expanding the way that artists think today, and arts organizations think about who they're engaging with. So we're continuing with that. We have sound walks in a cemetery in Brooklyn, in a botanical garden, up in Harlem. So there are these different sound walks that people can do on their own time. We've done installations that are, you download materials on the You Are Here site, and then you go experience the installation that's a real-time installation. Yeah, so it's a spectrum of stuff. I think that artists are thinking differently about how they make work and um, why they make work and who they're making work for. And I think if you're in the performing arts, you're thinking about your audience. If you're in the visual arts, maybe you think about the work that you're creating and a viewer will see it. But in the performing arts, that interaction with the live audience is really at the core of it. So you have to be thinking about who you're talking to and why um, throughout your creative art making. Yeah. So that's kind of an overview of our programs. I think that I'll start. I see some questions starting to pop up in the chat, so maybe I'll start taking some of those. So if you have some, throw them in. I can talk a little bit about my work as a director, but why don't I do a couple of these questions and then I'll pop back in about my directing work because I haven't talked on that at all. The question one. Kristen, you've directed 29 stage work. Oh, whoops, question one just popped away. There it is. Question one, can you share some of the most significant challenges you've faced during your career in theater and how you managed to overcome them? Sure. 9/11 was probably a really big one here in New York City. And because of where here is located, it wasn't just the tragedy of what happened. It was also the proximity of our theater, and it was close. We couldn't go to our theater. We couldn't go anywhere near it for a long period of time. And the city there was such a sense of fear that even once things started to open back up, it took a long time for audiences to start coming back to the lower Manhattan area because there was so much trauma associated with that area. And then there was huge economic fallout that also followed, that there was real declines in funding and declines in attendance, like all these, you were hit on all these different areas at once. And so one of the things that we learned through that was that we needed to partner with our other fellow organizations. So we formed a group with a bunch of other Lower Manhattan-based organizations called Lower Manhattan Arts Leaders. And the 11 or 12 of us, the 12 organizations, met on a regular basis, and we advocated for funds together. Instead of competing with each other, we worked together to try to develop resources. We did cross-marketing to help attract more audiences back and to express that there was a live energy, lots of stuff happening, come be part of it. So I think that lesson of really coming together was really the key to all of us overcoming that. And, we got through it and it felt pretty shaky for that first year back of really trying to develop the resources together. But we really did. COVID was huge, and it was an incredibly stressful time to have, an uncertain amount of time where you didn't know how long your business was closed, and to be adaptive. And as I mentioned, we launched this online and outdoor programming. We launched 3 days after we closed. We started doing stuff, and we just really kept going and exploring from home and learning how to make work on Zoom and how to get video to work with Zoom and like all kinds of stuff. I made my first Zoom. I made the first Zoom opera in the world. It was like in April of 2020. And that was a really fun exploration that I made with Kamala Shankaram and Rob Handel, who are two artists I had collaborated with on another project as a director. And we had a really fun time making that with amazing performers all over the country at that time. And we just it presented new opportunities, but it obviously presented a huge amount of financial stress for an organization that is ticketing based and in-person based. And we had to figure out what those new models were. We had a lot of struggles. I was really concerned. Our staff was about 13 people at the time, and I wanted to keep everyone paid somehow because in America, the insurance is attached to where you work. And I just couldn't lay anybody off and have them not have access to insurance, even though we were closed. So we worked a system where we had people working part-time, and there was a shared work program that we found in New York State, so they could be collecting unemployment and work, and then they could keep their insurance and collect unemployment. And so we were able to work a system where we kept everyone employed through those years. But it was a really definitely the most challenging part, and it is not over. It's our industry, the performing arts industry, has not come back the way that it had, the way that it was before COVID. We still across the country, and I think this is a global phenomenon for theaters. There's decreased attendance, and a lot of funding challenges, and particularly here in the U.S. There was not very much government support for our field, and it also came quite late. So we had to cope with a lot of solutions for like a year and a half before any government money came to us, where like the airlines were bailed out within a month. But for the performing arts, it took a year and a half before we had any government help, and we had no revenues. So it was a very, very stressful time. And we also had the racial reckoning that began with George Floyd and has reverberated through our industry in terms of our working practices and how to be more human and humane and balanced as an industry. And so that has also changed a lot of practices for folks in the field. And a lot of those practices are a lot more expensive. And we've really been a leader in, we've added a self-care fund for non-union artists, because union artists receive pension and health, but non-union artists do not. And so we started a self-care fund that is for all the non-union artists that we work with. We have cultural coordinators on every project. We have, before COVID, we were not doing 10 out of 12s in tech any longer, which is a common practice in the theater industry. So we've just made huge changes that continue to impact how we work, and trying to grow audiences back again is a really big. It's still happening. It's not over. It's a challenge I'm still trying to overcome. And working with my colleagues across the field, the same collaboration that happened during 9/11 has happened during COVID, where we talk on a regular basis. There's several groups that I'm part of. There's an artistic director group of theaters. There's an artistic director group of dance presenters and producers. And then there was a larger New York City culture group that was meeting on a regular basis. It's ebbed a bit now, but working together has been really important once again, and not competing, but thinking of collaboration. I'll hop to the next question. You've directed 29 stage works over the past 25 years. Could you share which has had the most profound personal impact on you and why? Yeah, that's interesting. I think I'll just talk about an upcoming project, because it's really been very exciting to develop and very personally powerful. It's called Joan of the City, and it's a piece that's dealing with the unhoused and homelessness, and particularly for women. And it's talking about gentrification and displacement in the U.S., which is a really huge problem. I started working on this piece with Kamala Shankaram, the composer that I mentioned before. I started working before COVID on it, but it's become even more pressing. The premise of the work is taking the Joan of Arc, the story of Joan of Arc, and the fact that she had visions and no one believed her, but these visions guided her actions. And eventually kind of people came on board, but it all didn't work out for her at the end. She gets burned at the stake. So that's the Joan of Arc story, taking that story and mapping it to 5 different Joans of different backgrounds. And these Joans are in the street, and they've been displaced. They no longer have homes, and they're fighting gentrification and trying to overcome the different forces of gentrification in their city. And then they join together, and they don't quite make it, but there's a lot that happens that is strengthened by them coming together. And the way the piece is being structured is it's in the streets, it's not in a theater. And as an audience member, you are told to arrive at a location. You get to that location, and there'll be 25-ish other audience members, and you will be given augmented reality glasses So instead of VR, which covers your eyes completely and you only see what's in it, augmented reality, you see what is in the world in front of you, but you also see these visions. And you also can hear what Joan hears. So the Joan is singing to you. It is an opera. She's singing, she's talking, she's in the street, and you're with her and you're seeing her visions and you're hearing what she's hearing, and you follow her on her journey in the streets. That Joan travels, you travel with her. You won't see visions while you're walking. We don't want anyone to get hit by a car. So you'll just be walking. And then when you arrive at the next location, things will start to happen again. She meets a musician. Another experience happens there. She travels further. She meets another Joan and another musician. And then eventually all 5 Joans, all 5 audiences join together. So there's about 125, 130 audience members. And you've been on this journey together, and now you see what she sees, you hear what she hears, and you can remove your glasses, and now her visions are on the world large. So we're projection mapping onto buildings, and the audio is out in the space. So you're fully integrated. And the goal is to really develop empathy and understanding, as opposed to having this alienating experience. And the project, Kamala and I didn't want to be writing the words and representing the views of the folks that we're trying to represent in the show. So we partnered with 2 shelters that work with women clients, and they do writing workshops. And we did writing workshops with them with prompts related to the topics that we had come across in our research. And these women have written all of the texts that are sung. They've written the lyrics to the songs, they've written the scenes, everything that they've written is what's spoken and sung in the piece. And we have paid them a fee for their words, and we'll pay royalties to the shelter that will go back to these women. And that was really important to us. And then each city where we do the work, we will be working with a local shelter, and we will have a bookend to the beginning and the end of the work that will be specific to that city. But then the bulk of the work is what we've developed, the full arc. So that piece has been really important to me. We've been developing it with Opera Omaha and Opera San Diego, and it will go to at least those 2 cities. And the hope is that it's going to go to 5 or 6 different cities. So that's been a really exciting project, and it kind of pulls together a bunch of the different things that interest me as a director. I've done a lot of political and socially conscious work through my career. That's been a really big thread of the work that I've done. It's multidisciplinary. It's working with opera. It's working with multimedia video. It has some really exciting challenges with the AR that we are, hard work developing. So it's such an important topic for the time that we're living in right now. The problem in the United States has increased exponentially in this last period of time. Great. Question 3, you did such a great work. What's your motivation and life goal? That's so interesting. Like, I love the work that I do. I feel really lucky to work. Every project I do is a different experience, and it's never like I'm doing the same thing again. Every project presents new challenges and new ways of thinking. So I just keep wanting to make work that is meaningful for audiences and meaningful for me and the other artists that I'm collaborating with to create the work. I feel like I've gotten to do a lot of what I really love, and been very lucky to have that created and to have had that opportunity. Yeah. Next question. Oh, have I had experience acting on a stage? And what are the principles to attract young actors or actresses into the here theater? I did act at the beginning. I only acted in one of our shows all the way back in 1988. But it's really, my interest has been as a director and creative producer, and that's really my strength. I think it's better for all of us that I'm directing and creative producing than acting. Though I have the utmost respect for the risks and the vulnerability of actors and what they put out there. And I think that relates to your second question about what are the principles. It's that an artist has really brought themselves to the place where they have skill over their body, their voice, and their access to their emotions. Like when they come in with those skills, and then they can really take risks in exploring how to connect to the ideas and the emotions that the work demands. And they have the rigor, um, and they have that transformative immediacy that can take you as a viewer to another place. That's what really will stand out when a performer can really they it's like you travel to another place because of the emotional journey that they're on, and you're riding on the road with them. And I think that is really, really magical when you can have that experience. Um, and that's what you look for when you're trying to find new performers to work with, and to explore. Um, Please pop more questions into the chat if you have them. Um, the next thing, the next question is, what was the most commercially effective way and why? Um, I think that our most successful work would be a work that you might be familiar with. It's the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. Um, that's a work that has been performed in all over the world, and it is a project that started very small in our small theater that was 70 seats. And we supported Eve as she was trying to interview women and try to find what that work was. And we worked with her for about a year before we premiered the work, and then we were able to run the work for quite a while. The Vagina Monologues is the story of how women think about their bodies and themselves in the world. And it was told originally by Eve, the writer, and she didn't used to perform at that time. She was a writer, and she decided to perform this particular work. And it was both her own experience and her own experience of interviewing these women and kind of entering their worlds and thinking about their bodies and their vaginas and what that meant to the world, what it meant for birth, what it meant for sex, what it meant for the center of their power, like all of these different realms. A ton of women writers, influential women writers attended the work. It's been written up, and it's gone to be like a global phenomenon. Some of the most famous performers in the film world have performed versions of it. And it's been done in high schools and colleges and all over the world. So that's probably the piece that has had the deepest impact commercially. And I think it's because it spoke to to 50% of the population and how they think about their center of power. And I think that a lot of women were interested in talking about that, and something that had been a taboo topic became a more acceptable social norm. This person also asks the most loyal auditorium visiting theaters in New York. I think that it depends what you want to see. There's the Broadway theaters, which the shows change, and there are some long running shows, and then there's this community of off Broadway and off Broadway. So it really depends in terms of theater, like what kind of work is your aesthetic. And I think that there are audiences, we call them the here audiences who come to a lot of stuff. We call them the repeat offenders. They come to the theater stuff, they come to the puppet stuff, they come to the dance stuff, they come to the music stuff because they like all of it. There are other people who are very loyal here audience members who just come to our puppetry work. And then they also will go to the puppetry work at La Mama and St. Anne's Warehouse. There are others who like our dance work, and then they'll go to New York Live Arts, and they'll go to the Joyce. And, so I think that the exciting thing about New York is that every night, there's hundreds of things you could see. And you just need to dig through that needle, that giant haystack to find what the things are that interest you. And you can keep yourself quite busy and see work every night if you want to, in just your aesthetic, or you can stretch yourself and see stuff in all different aesthetics every night. So that's a pretty fun thing about New York. The next question is, as a woman in a leadership role in the theater world, what advice do you have for aspiring female leaders in the arts? I think this is a great question. I think that the performing arts is an easier place than some of the more conventional business arenas to be a woman leader and to have the opportunity. I think there's less sexism than there is in some of the other industries where it's more entrenched. But it is quite common that at the top of the structures, it's men instead of women. So there is still work to be done. In terms of sexism, in terms of racism. There are so many different layers of obstacles, but I do feel like, I'm someone who, I studied theater directing. I didn't even study producing. I didn't study accounting, marketing. I've learned all of this in the trenches. And, I grew an organization from nothing to having a staff of 16 people. I didn't know that's what I was going to do when I got out of theater school and I was 21 years old and I was a director. So, it's been a really circuitous and interesting path. And I think that I'm still a believer that if you have a vision and you have passion, you can apply that. And the most important lesson that I always say is, I made a lot of mistakes, but the smart thing was after I made that mistake once, I didn't make that mistake a second time. So learn from your mistakes. Don't repeat the same things over and over again. And it's a simple lesson, but it's really applicable in terms of trying to really advance your organization and the choices that you want to make. If you want to be a creative, think twice about producing yourself as an or starting an organization or starting a space. I love what I do. I love the creative producing, but my directing definitely hasn't been foregrounded in my career because I was always making this choice between the organization and my directing. And I had to say no to jobs in order to protect the health and well-being of the organization. So there's a balancing act there that you should think about. And then I would say also, I think a lot of women have anxiety about having children and that affecting the trajectory of their careers. And I think that we're past that and that that's very doable and very workable and that the expectations in our contemporary culture are so welcoming to children now and responsibilities that both partners have, whatever kind of relationship you're in, that both partners have that responsibility. And I think that it's just continuing to push that forward and to model it and to support other young leaders as you're coming up, bring people along with you. I was lucky to have a couple of people really provide wonderful mentorship and guidance to me along the way. And I felt like that was a responsibility I had, particularly to young up and coming women leaders and young women directors. And I've worked with a ton of them and mentored a ton over the years. And I feel like it's a really important ongoing role that I have and responsibility. We're almost out of time. Let's see. Could you share some insight into how you approach the creation of a new work from scratch? What are the important elements to consider and what is your process like? It is different on every project. That project that I mentioned, Kamala and I did a huge amount of research on homelessness, both from a scientific perspective and from a first-person narrative perspective, where people who were formerly unhoused wrote about their work and their experience and how they overcame it and what their background was. And we really massively researched. So there was a whole phase of doing that. And that I find really fun. I did another piece that was about citizenship and civic responsibility called Lush Valley. And when you arrived, you applied for citizenship to this fictional country. And then you entered like a big citizenship office and you had to go through these interviews and you had to do these small group conversations. And there were dance numbers and songs and private conversations that you overheard and all this kind of stuff. So it was another immersive work. But in that piece, we had an amazing time doing research for about 2 years before we did the work. We had these monthly think tanks that were on different tenets of the American dream, ambition, patriotism, and people would come and talk about this. And this was a great research phase. So there's all kinds of stuff that we do to build each project that's specific to what really gets you excited and gets you plugged into what it's really about. So that's super fun. I'll just do this last one quickly, and then I'm going to wrap this up. On a more personal note, outside of your professional life, are there particular interests or hobbies that help you unwind or fuel your creativity? Definitely meditation, hiking, and the beach, and dancing. I would add dancing to that too. That really keeps me sane. My meditation and getting out, because I live in such an urban environment. Getting out every weekend to hike or to go to the beach really means a lot to my balance and ability to be there for other people. So yeah, I think that's what I'd want to say. This was so odd to not see any humans, but lovely to be speaking to you humans where you are. And I want to thank the American Center in Moscow for inviting me to join you this evening, and wish you all a lot of luck in your lives and a lot of creativity and connection. And good evening. Enjoy your night.